Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. In this episode, I will be talking about the interface between Maoism-Third Worldism and my own version of intersectional Marxism. So let me go ahead and do that. For that, I will put on my spectacles because I need to read you something. This is actually from my book, Eudaimonic Utopia. I will read it and then periodically make some comments. Okay. Intersectional Marxism is a far-left transformation of intersectionality, which should not be confused with the original progressive intersectionality of legal scholar Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, Patricia Hill Collins, who was a sociologist, and other African American feminists. And at this point, I will be giving you an illustration, which is me. And so I'll be talking about myself because I know more about me than I do about anyone else. So I think that makes sense in this particular context. Not that I like talking about myself that much, but I think it makes sense here. Okay, as an illustration, within the first world of the capitalist world system, and that capitalist world system can also be called intersectionality or the class system. I am at the intersection of a number of thoroughfares. They include personal class. And by personal class, I'm talking about not class in general, which is the class system, but where I personally lie in that class system. And here I am referring to my own model or diagram of the class system. And so I use the term class conscious, wealthy, non-capitalist workers. If you want to see that model in detail, you can go to Eudaimonic Utopia, which is linked below this video, and read the entire book, I hope, and then comment on it, I hope, so I can respond, I hope, to what you say. Okay, second race. And what I put here is supposedly white, but consciously brown. What I mean by that is that I realize that I benefit from white privilege. Obviously, I do. I suppose I look white to most people. Although on one occasion, when I was online, someone looked at my photograph and thought I was African American, which actually surprised me. It pleased me as well, but it surprised me. I don't understand why she thought I looked African American, but that was her impression of my appearance. So again, I recognize that I'm seen as being white, and I'm not going to deny that I benefit from all the privileges associated with being white, like not being regularly harassed by the police, although that happened to me for the first time this past week, but consciously brown, meaning I think of myself as an Ashkenazi Jew as being a brown person, a person of color. My feeling is that if Arabs, for example, are seen as brown, as people of color, and they are my Semitic cousins, then why should I not be seen as brown as well? So that's my justification for that. My gender, and here I say I am a cisgender male. I think that's pretty obvious. And my disability, I could list a few here, but I put autism. Taken together, they offer me relative degrees of wealth, power, privilege, and prestige. Thoroughfares can vary. In other words, not all societies have tribes. Not all societies have a concept of race either. I have been to a place, Central Africa, where they literally have no concept of race. And so when I arrived there, I was immediately labeled as a European. That's what they called me. When African Americans went to Africa, they also were labeled as Europeans. which disappointed many African Americans who were hoping to find a sense of bonding in Africa, but that is not what happened, at least to many of them. Okay, so that's my own take on intersectional Marxism. I do not think it should be confused with other people's versions of it, like Ashley Bower, who is probably the preeminent scholar in that field. But nonetheless, that's how I look at it. And so I would put myself in those categories. And so, in other words, if I place myself, if I want to understand who I am and what position I am in, I will look at the intersection of those particular structures. There are additional structures too that I did not include, but if I look at the intersection of those structures, I can have some idea of who I am, how much power I have, how much money I make, how much privilege I have, and so forth. And I think that is an important thing to do. In fact, I would recommend that as a personal exercise to do. It was certainly useful for me. And I think that people who share a common intersection share common power, wealth, privilege, and prestige as well. So I think those go together. And although I am talking here about my own intersection, that could be applied to others as well, and also again, people with similar intersections might be classified together and examined as if they were belonging to the same general category, whatever that might mean in a particular case. So in any event, that is basically, in a very, very, very simple way, my way of developing intersectional Marxism. Now, how do I take that and combine it with Maoism-Third Worldism, or as I sometimes call it, socialism from below, Third Worldism, Fourth Worldism? To me, those are the same thing. Just as what I say about intersectional Marxism is my own take on it, what I say about Maoism-Third Worldism is also my own take on it. I do not blame anyone else for what I say. It is purely my own version of it. Having met many Maoist Third Worldists over the last several months, I can say with some degree of confidence that most of us have different views of Maoism-Third Worldism. We are not in consensus on what Maoism-Third Worldism is. And I think that is very good because it opens room for dialogue. Okay, so if I take those two things, Maoism-Third Worldism, or socialism from below, Third Worldism, Fourth Worldism, which basically looks at the relationship within the capitalist world system between the first world and the third and fourth worlds. And I can look at the different intersectional positions that people occupy based upon whatever statuses they have, their personal class, their race, their gender, their disability, and so on. And I can compare those with similar things that exist in other types of societies. So, for example, I can look at the personal class, race, gender, and disability in the first world and compare them with those in the third world and the fourth world. And if we do that, inevitably, what I think we will find is that people in the first world are intersectionally more privileged than people in the third world and the fourth world. Now, those are generalizations. Obviously, they would not be true in every single case. Certainly, there are many people in the third world who are quite wealthy. The problem with the third world in many cases is that you have a huge disparity between the wealthy and the poor. And and then not much middle class. It is similar to an extent here in the US, which is a first world country. We do have a middle class, but compared to many other first world countries, it is relatively small. But I think that a comparison can be made, and still, the United States, for example, would come out on top in terms of things like personal class, race, gender, and disability, meaning how much power people have within those different categories, how much privilege, prestige, and so on people have within those different categories than they would in the third world and the fourth world. So I think that consistently people in the first world would come out on top. And that is very unfortunate, but that is the way the world is right now. Hopefully, the capitalist world system, which is dominated by the first world, and in particular by the United States of America, will not occupy that position of dominance for that much longer. How much longer is not that much longer? Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. But I do hope that at some point in the not too distant future, that the first world collapses, and with it, the capitalist world system, since the capitalist world system is what basically supports the first world, and the first world supports the capitalist world system. And then at that point, people in the third world or the fourth world, or perhaps even both, can begin building a new capitalist world system. Again, I don't know if or when that will happen. I hope it will happen relatively soon, but what soon means, again, I have no idea. But it's something that I yearn for, especially looking at the events taking place in Gaza. I cannot stand to see people suffer to that degree while I am blessed with so much undeserved privilege. And I really mean that, undeserved privilege. I do not deserve it. And I'm speaking personally. I'm not speaking about anybody else. I know that I personally do not deserve it. I should not have the wealth that I have, the status that I have, the privilege and the power that I have. And nevertheless, that is my fate. And so I'm trying to make the best of it by helping out as many people as I can. So, in a very brief sense, as an overview, that is the way that I would relate the perspectives of Maoism-Third Worldism and intersectional Marxism. Again, I think they are very compatible perspectives, especially when you take intersectionality and transfer it into intersectional Marxism. Intersectionality, as it was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw, Patricia Hill Collins, and others, is not compatible with Maoism-Third Worldism at all, in my view. In fact, I would say it is very incompatible with it, but not so with intersectional Marxism. I think that both intersectional Marxism and Maoism-Third Worldism make very good partners. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.